Hello. Welcome to Storytime with Moog. I am Moog, and today we are continuing on with The Hunchback of Notre-Dame by Victor Hugo, starting with part 2, book ninth, chapter 2. But first. Um, but I also went a little crazy with my books. So I have a bunch of books here in my lap, and I'll just show you. I'll just show you. I went to the library today, so I picked up a bunch of things, and one of the things that I had on hold, I waited far too long, so I couldn't pick it up, but I made up for it by picking up something else that wasn't waiting for me. And I was just like, oh, let me go see if so, I'll just browse. And it's fine. I'm gonna be busy because I have a lot of books. Okay, so I guess we'll just start. We'll start. Okay, so I picked up Divine Rivals. Absolutely no idea what it's about. Absolutely no idea. It's a teen book, apparently. Oh, somebody left something in here. Somebody left their. I don't know what this is. Some kind of library jargon. Um, it's a teen book. It won for the Goodreads Choice Award for 2023. Maybe for top teen fiction. I don't know. I don't know. But I have this. So I'll be reading this. And I know nothing about it. Don't even ask me. I mean, you can, but I will have no answers for you. So I have Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I have a chat recommendation that came in, Wisconsin Death Trip, which is a really fun shape of a book, and I kind of love it. But there's a lot of like photos, which is why it's shaped the way that it is, because it's so artsy. Like photography books are shaped like this often. So I'm excited to read this. There's a lot of photos in here actually. And this was a chat recommendation, so I'm excited to get to this. And then I was like, hey, it's poetry month. I should probably read some poetry. And then something, I don't know why, but I requested more books than what came in. So there's more on the way, but I have 3 different poetry books, and I don't even read poetry all that often. So we'll see. But I have Black Girl Magic. It is the Breakbeat Poets volume number 2. So I have this one. I have Rose, poems by Lee Young Lee. This one's very small. This one is like a collection. And then I have Lessons on Expulsion by Erica L. Sanchez. So I'm excited. And I do remember like looking at them. There was like an article on the library's website that was like, hey, it's poetry month. This is what we recommend. And I remember them being like very, like this one and this one, I think were like very dark. And it's like, my, I'll read that. And then the book that I could not get was the next volume in Demon Slayer, but I did meander over to see if it was still like on the shelf, and I was just slow. I don't know. But I picked up Heartstopper, the next volume, volume 5. It came out in January, and I have not read it yet. I think it's also bigger than the other ones. I think they're getting bigger and bigger. But it is a teen graphic novel about, young love, finding yourself, coming of age, all that good stuff. It's cute. There is a show on Netflix that covers the first 2 books, I think. I think. Demons, maybe possibly Slade. Spoilers. And then I have 2 books that I bought. So when I dropped my car off today, there was a thrift shop that was really close. So I walked in there, and of course, I walked over to the book section, and I picked up this one. I haven't heard anything about it, but I read the inside cover, and it sounds really cool. And it is How Beautiful We Are by Mbola Mbu. I said that name wrong and I apologize. I should have looked it up. But it sounds really cool. It's about this fictional African village that is being destroyed by pipelines and like oil spills and stuff. So I think it'll be good. I'm excited. And then I also picked up Neuromancer by William Gibson. I didn't pick this up from the thrift shop. I just bought this separately. And it is our July Patreon book club read. And it's going to be a show, a movie. It's going to be something in 2025, I think. So I'm excited. And oops, it's also part of a series. So oopsie, I guess I'm starting another series. Oopsie, oopsie, oopsie. Okay, those are all of the books that I have in my lap. So we've done it. We went through the pile. But today we are reading The Hunchback of Notre-Dame by Victor Hugo. And oh, wild things happened last time. Okay, let's see. Let's see if I can just scootle back just a little bit. Okay. Okay, so I'm trying to think of like where we started last time. So let's see. I guess we'll start with Esmeralda. So Esmeralda was tortured and confessed to witchcraft, to her goat being a familiar, like all of these things, to killing the head of the king's guard, like all these things that she did not do, but she was being tortured, so she confessed to make the torture stop. And so then she was sentenced to making a public apology and a hanging, and her goat also needs to be hanged. Hate it. And so that is, I guess we'll continue with her line. So then, a couple days, she is staying in this cellar, this prison, I guess, for a very, very long time. And she is just like basically waiting for death because it has been so, so long. And it's dark all the time, so she doesn't know how long she's been there. She doesn't know if it's day, she doesn't know if it's night. None of those things. And so, Claude, Claude comes down and is like, I will get you out of here because you're gonna die tomorrow. Tomorrow they will hang you. And she's like, oh my gosh, why can't it be today? Tomorrow is far too long from now. He's like, I'll get you out. Just be with me. Just love me forever and I will smuggle you out. And she's like, no. She's like, how can you talk to me about living if the love of my life, Phoebus, is dead? And so he is mad. He's like, ugh, fine. And so she is taken the next day to the place where she's doing the public apology. She is sort of in like a hazy state. She doesn't really quite understand like what's going on. She's just repeating the things that she has to repeat, all of these things. And she Hmm. I'm trying to think of like the best way to talk about this because there's two other things that are happening at this time. Okay. So she is about to be taken away to the actual like gallows and Claude again is like, "Hey, there's still time. Phoebus is dead. I'll save you." And she's like, "Yeah, Phoebus is dead. Why should I be here?" Like that type of thing. And Claude turns around and he looks up and he sees Phoebus and he is enraged. And so he's like, well, I'm not going to help her because if I can't have her, nobody can. And Claude. And while this is happening, Phoebus is hanging out with his cousin, soon to be wife, and they look outside and they see, like, oh, look, that's that young bohemian traveler who did some devilry in this very room. And isn't she the one that you saved several nights ago? Blah, blah, blah. And so they're watching this, and Esmeralda does look up and sees that Phoebus is alive, and now she wants to live because she is just like, wait a minute, I didn't actually kill him, he's still alive. Hooray! So exciting. Let's see. And so they take her to the gallows, and they are about to do the deed when swinging in like Tarzan comes Quasimodo, and he grabs her and brings her back up to like his bell tower. And Claude does not see this. Claude is like wandering the streets of Paris just in dismay, blah, 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 hoping that he can forget her. Somehow he's unable to, and he's a mess. And he goes back to Notre-Dame, and he's like, you know what? I'm gonna hang out with Quasimodo. He will keep me company. He's a good pal. And so he goes up there and he sees what he thinks is the ghost of Esmeralda and the ghost of her goat, but we know that it's real. And I think that's everything. I think that's everything. Okay. Part 2, Book Ninth, Chapter 2. Hunchbacked, one-eyed, lame. Every city during the Middle Ages, and every city in France down to the time of Louis the 12th, had its places of asylum. These sanctuaries, in the midst of the deluge of penal and barbarous jurisdictions which inundated the city, were a species of islands which rose above the level of human justice. Every criminal who landed there was safe. There were in every suburb almost as many places of asylum as gallows. It was the abuse of impunity by the side of the abuse of punishment. Two bad things which strove to correct each other. The palaces of the king, the hotels of the princes, and especially churches, possessed the right of asylum. Sometimes a whole city, which stood in need of being repeopled, was temporarily created a place of refuge. Louis XI made all Paris a refuge in 1467. His foot once within the asylum, the criminal was sacred, but he must beware of leaving it. One step outside the sanctuary, and he fell back into the flood, the wheel, the gibbet, the strappado, kept good guard around the place of refuge, and lay in watch incessantly for their prey, like sharks around a vessel. Hence, condemned men were to be seen whose hair had grown white in a cloister, on the steps of a palace, in the enclosure of an abbey, beneath the porch of a church. In this manner, the asylum was a prison as much as any other. It sometimes happened that a solemn decree of Parliament violated the asylum and restored the condemned man to the executioner, but this was of rare occurrence. Parliaments were afraid of the bishops, and when there was friction between these two robes, the gown had but a poor chance against the cassock. Sometimes, however, as in the affair of the assassins of Petit Jean, the headsman of Paris, and in that of Emery Rousseau, the murderer of Jean Valeret, justice overleaped the church and passed on to the execution of its sentences. But unless by virtue of a decree of Parliament, woe to him who violated a place of asylum with armed forces. The reader knows the manner of death of Robert de Clermont, Marshal of France, and Jean de Chalon, Marshal of Champagne. And yet, the question was only of a certain Perrin Marc, the clerk of a money-changer, a miserable assassin. But the two marshals had broken the doors of Saint Mary. Therein lie the enormity. Such respect was cherished for places of refuge that, according to tradition, animals even felt it at times. Amoir relates that a stag, being chased by Dagobert, having taken refuge near the tomb of Saint Denis, the pack of hounds stopped short and barked. Churches generally had a small apartment prepared for the reception of supplicants. In 1407, Nicholas Flamel caused to be built on the vaults of Saint Jacques de la Boucherie a chamber which cost him 4 livres, 6 sous, 16 farthings Parisian. At Notre-Dame, it was a tiny cell situated on the roof of the side aisle beneath the flying buttresses, precisely at the spot where the wife of the present janitor of the towers has made for herself a garden, which is to the hanging gardens of Babylon what a lettuce is to a palm tree, what a porter's wife is to a Semiramis. It was here that Quasimodo had deposited La Esmeralda, after his wild and triumphant course. As long as that course lasted, the young girl had been unable to recover her senses, half unconscious, half awake, no longer feeling anything, except that she was mounting through the air, floating in it, flying in it, that something was raising her above the earth. From time to time she heard the loud laughter, the noisy voice of Quasimodo in her ear. She half opened her eyes. Then below her she confusedly beheld Paris checkered with its 1,000 roofs of slate and tiles, like a red and blue mosaic. Above her head the frightful and joyous face of Quasimodo. Then her eyelids drooped again. She thought that was all over, that they had executed her during her swoon, and that the misshapen spirit which had presided over her destiny had laid hold of her and was bearing her away. She dared not look at him, and she surrendered herself to her fate. But when the bell-ringer, disheveled and panting, had deposited her in the cell of refuge, when she felt his huge hands gently detaching the cord which bruised her arms, she felt that sort of shock which awakens with a start the passengers of a vessel which runs aground in the middle of a dark night. Her thoughts awoke also, and returned to her one by one. She saw that she was in Notre-Dame. She remembered having been torn from the hands of the executioner, that Phoebus was alive, that Phoebus loved her no longer. And as these two ideas, one of which shed so much bitterness over the other, presented themselves simultaneously to the poor, condemned girl, she turned to Quasimodo, who was standing in front of her, and who terrified her. She said to him, "Why have you saved me?" He gazed at her with anxiety, as though seeking to divine what she was saying to him. She repeated her question. Then he gave her a profoundly sorrowful glance and fled. She was astonished. A few moments later he returned, bearing a package which he cast at her feet. It was clothing which some charitable woman had left on the threshold of the church for her. Then she dropped her eyes upon herself and saw that she was almost naked, and blushed. Life had returned. Quasimodo appeared to experience something of this modesty. He covered his eyes with his large hand and retired once more, but slowly. She made haste to dress herself. The robe was a white one, with a white veil, the garb of a novice of the Hôtel Dieu. She had barely finished when she beheld Quasimodo returning. He carried a basket under one arm and a mattress under the other. In the basket there was a bottle, bread, and some provisions. He set the basket on the floor and said, "Eat." He spread the mattress on the flagging and said, "Sleep." It was his own repast. It was his own bed, which the bell-ringer had gone in search of. The young condemned girl raised her eyes to thank him, but she could not articulate a word. She dropped her head with a quiver of terror. Then he said to her, "I frighten you. I am very ugly, am I not? Do not look at me. Only listen to me. During the day you will remain here. At night you can walk all over the church. But do not leave the church either by day or by night. You would be lost. They would kill you, and I should die." She was touched, and raised her head to answer him. He had disappeared. She found herself alone once more, meditating upon the singular words of this almost monstrous being, and struck by the sound of his voice, which was so hoarse, yet so gentle. Then she examined her cell. It was a chamber about 6 feet square, with a small window and a door on the slightly sloping plane of the roof formed of flat stones. Many gutters with the figures of animals seemed to be bending down around her and stretching their necks in order to stare at her through the window. Over the edge of her roof, she perceived the tops of thousands of chimneys, which caused the smoke of all the fires in Paris to rise beneath her eyes. A sad sight for the poor girl, a foundling, condemned to death, an unhappy creature, without country, without family, without a hearthstone. At the moment when the thought of her isolation thus appeared to her more poignant than ever, she felt a bearded and hairy head glide between her hands upon her knees. She started. Everything alarmed her now, and looked. It was the poor goat, the agile Jolly, which had made its escape after her at the moment when Quasimodo had put to flight Charmolus' brigade, which had been lavishing caresses on her feet for nearly an hour past, without being able to win a glance. The girl covered him with kisses. "Oh, Jolly," she said, "how I have forgotten thee! And so thou still thinkest of me. Oh, thou art not an ingrate." At the same time, as though an invisible hand had lifted the weight which had repressed her tears in her heart for so long, she began to weep, and in proportion as her tears flowed, she felt all that was most acrid and bitter in her grief depart with them. Evening came. She thought the night so beautiful that she made the circuit of the elevated gallery which surrounds the church. It afforded her some relief, so calm did the earth appear when viewed from that height. Okay, end of chapter 2. All right, so this chapter we get some history of, being able to call sanctuary in certain places, and Notre-Dame is one of them. And so, yeah, so Esmeralda is sort of coming out of her shock. At first she thinks that, she has already died and she's being like whooshed through to, the afterlife by this spirit, the spirit being Quasimodo. And then she's coming to, and Quasimodo is talking, or she's asking Quasimodo several questions, and Quasimodo is not really answering all that much. Reminder, he is deaf. And so he just like brings her things to sleep. He brings her clothes that somebody had left in the church for her. And he starts talking, like guidelines almost for her protection, and saying like don't leave this area at the day. You can roam around at night, but don't leave the church day or night because they will come and get you and they will kill you. Also, don't look at me. I know I'm ugly. Just listen to my words. And also the little goat made it. Little goat escaped. So that's where we're at. That's where the chapter ended. Chapter 3. Death. On the following morning, she perceived, on awaking, that she had been asleep. This singular thing astonished her. She had been so long unaccustomed to sleep. A joyous ray of the rising sun entered through her window and touched her face. At the same time with the sun, she beheld at that window an object which frightened her, the unfortunate face of Quasimodo. She involuntarily closed her eyes again, but in vain. She fancied that she still saw through the rosy lids that gnome's mask, one-eyed and gap-toothed. Then, while she still kept her eyes closed, she heard a rough voice saying very gently, "Be not afraid. I am your friend. I came to watch you sleep. It does not hurt you if I come to see you sleep, does it? What difference does it make to you if I am here when your eyes are closed? Now I am going. Stay. I have placed myself behind the wall. You can open your eyes again." There was something more plaintive than these words, and that was the accent in which they were uttered. The girl, much touched, opened her eyes. He was, in fact, no longer at the window. She approached the opening and beheld the poor hunchback crouching in an angle on the wall, in a sad and resigned attitude. She made an effort to surmount the repugnance with which he inspired her. "Come," she said to him gently. From the movement of the girl's lips, Quasimodo thought that she was driving him away. Then he rose and retired limping slowly, with drooping head, without even daring to raise to the young girl his gaze full of despair. "Do come," she cried, but he continued to retreat. Then she darted from her cell, ran to him, and grasped his arm. On feeling her touch him, Quasimodo trembled in every limb. He raised his suppliant eye, and seeing that she was leading him back to her quarters, his whole face beamed with joy and tenderness. She tried to make him enter the cell, but he persisted in remaining on the threshold. "No, no," said he, "the owl enters not the nest of the lark." Then she crouched down gracefully on her couch, with her goat asleep at her feet. Both remained motionless for several moments, considering in silence, she so much grace, he so much ugliness. Every moment she discovered some fresh deformity in Quasimodo. Her glance traveled from his knock-knees to his humped back, from his humped back to his only eye. She could not comprehend the existence of a being so awkwardly fashioned. Yet there was so much sadness and so much gentleness spread over all this, that she began to become reconciled to it. He was the first to break the silence. "So, you were telling me to return?" She made an affirmative sign of the head, and said, "Yes." He understood the motion of the head. "Alas," he said, as though hesitating whether to finish, I am deaf." "Oh, poor man!" cried the Bohemian, with an expression of kindly pity. He began to smile sadly. "You think that that was all that I lacked, do you not? Yes, I am deaf. That is the way I am made. 'Tis horrible, is it not? You are so beautiful." There lay in the accents of the wretched man so profound a consciousness of his misery that she had not the strength to say a word. Besides, he would not have heard her. He went on. "Never have I seen my ugliness as at the present moment. When I compare myself to you, I feel a great pity for myself, poor unhappy monster that I am. Tell me, I must look to you like a beast. You are a ray of sunshine, a drop of dew, the song of a bird. I am something frightful, neither man nor animal, I know not what, harder, more trampled underfoot, and more unshapely than a pebble stone." Then he began to laugh, and that laugh was the most heartbreaking thing in the world. He continued, "Yes, I am deaf, but you shall talk to me by gestures, by signs. I have a master who talks with me in that way, and then I shall very soon know your wish from the movement of your lips, from your look." "Well," she interposed with a smile, "tell me why you saved me." He watched her attentively while she was speaking. "I understand," he replied. "You asked me why I saved you. You have forgotten a wretch who tried to abduct you one night, a wretch to whom you rendered succor on the following day on their infamous pillory. A drop of water and a little pity. That is more than I can repay with my life. You have forgotten that wretch, but he remembers it." She listened to him with profound tenderness. A tear swam in the eye of the bell ringer, but did not fall. He seemed to make it a sort of point of honor to retain it. "Listen," he resumed, when he was no longer afraid that the tear would escape. "Our towers here are very high. A man who should fall from them would be dead before touching the pavement. When it shall please you to have me fall, you will not have to utter even a word. A glance will suffice." Then he rose. Unhappy was the Bohemian. This eccentric being still aroused some compassion in her. She made him a sign to remain. No, no, said he, I must not remain too long. I am not at my ease. It is out of pity that you do not turn away your eyes. I shall go to some place where I can see you without your seeing me. It will be better so. He drew from his pocket a little metal whistle. Here, said he, when you have need of me, when you wish me to come, when you will not feel too much horror at the sight of me, use this whistle. I can hear this sound. He laid the whistle on the floor and fled. End of chapter 3. All right, chapter 3. Short and sweet. Quasimodo and Esmeralda are getting to know each other. And Quasimodo says, you know, like, I'm deaf, I can't really hear you. He starts to, like, move away, and Esmeralda's calling after him, but can't hear. So she runs over to him and, like, brings him back. And so that's when he reveals that he is deaf. And he's like, you know, I have a master, like, soon you'll be able to, like, use hand signals and stuff that I'll be able to understand, but I can read lips sometimes. And so she asks him, like, why'd you save me? And he's like, oh, you don't remember, but this wretch definitely remembers when, like, I tried to abduct you, and the next day I was on the pillory, and you were the only one who showed me kindness and gave me something to drink, and I remember this. And he's being, like, self-deprecating about how ugly he is and everything like that, and, like, how he feels more ugly now in comparison to Esmeralda, and because she is just so beautiful. And she wants him to stay, and he's like, no, I'm gonna leave. Like, I know I'm a sight to look at, and I know you don't really want to hang out with me. You're just doing this out of pity. But when that passes and you actually do want to, you know, talk to me, and the sight of me doesn't make you scream, use this whistle. I can hear it. And that's when that chapter ended. Chapter 4. Earthenware and Crystal. Day followed day. Calm gradually returned to the soul of La Esmeralda. Excess of grief, like excess of joy, is a violent thing which lasts but a short time. The heart of man cannot remain long in one extremity. The young girl had suffered so much that nothing was left her but astonishment. With security, hope had returned to her. She was outside the pale of society, outside the pale of life. But she had a vague feeling that it might not be impossible to return to it. She was like a dead person who should hold in reserve the key to her tomb. She felt the terrible images which had so long persecuted her, gradually departing. All the hideous phantoms, Pirat, Tortureux, Jacques Charmolue, were effaced from her mind. All, even the priest. And then Phoebus was alive. She was sure of it. She had seen him. To her, the fact of Phoebus being alive was everything. After the series of fatal shocks which had overturned everything within her, she had found but one thing intact in her soul, one sentiment, her love for the captain. Love is like a tree. It sprouts forth of itself, sends its roots out deeply through our whole being, and often continues to flourish greenly over a heart in ruins. And the inexplicable point about it is that the more blind is this passion, the more tenacious it is. It is never more solid than when it has no reason in it. La Esmeralda did not think of the captain without bitterness, no doubt. No doubt it was terrible that he also should have been deceived, that he should have believed that impossible thing, that he could have conceived of a stab dealt by her, who would have given 1,000 lives for him. But, after all, she must not be too angry with him for it. Had she not confessed her crime? Had she not yielded, weak woman that she was, to torture? The fault was entirely hers. She should have allowed her fingernails to be torn out rather than such a word to be wrenched from her. In short, if she could not but see Phoebus one more, for a single minute, only one word would be required, one look, in order to undeceive him, to bring him back. She did not doubt it. She was astonished also at many singular things, at the accident of Phoebus's presence on the day of the penance, at the young girl with whom he had been. She was his sister, no doubt. An unreasonable explanation, but she contented herself with it, because she needed to believe that Phoebus still loved her, and loved her alone. Had he not sworn it to her? What more was needed, simple and credulous as she was? And then, in this matter, were not appearances much more against her than against him? Accordingly, she waited. She hoped. Let us add that the church, that vast church which surrounded her on every side, which guarded her, which saved her, was itself a sovereign tranquilizer. The solemn lines of that architecture, the religious attitude of all the objects which surrounded the young girl, the serene and pious thoughts which emanated, so to speak, from all the pores of that stone, acted upon her without her being aware of it. The edifice had also sounds fraught with such benediction and such majesty that they soothed this ailing soul. The monotonous chanting of the celebrants, the response of the people to the priest, sometimes inarticulate, sometimes thunderous, the harmonious trembling of the painted windows, the organ bursting forth like 100 trumpets, the 3 belfries humming like hives of huge bees, that whole orchestra on which bounded a gigantic scale, ascending, descending incessantly from the voice of a throng to that of one bell, dulled by memory, her imagination, her grief. The bells, in particular, lulled her. It was something like a powerful magnetism which those vast instruments shed over her in great waves. Thus, every sunrise found her more calm, breathing better, less pale. In proportion as her inward wounds closed, her grace and beauty blossomed once more on her countenance, but more thoughtful, more reposeful. Her former character also returned to her, somewhat even of her gaiety, her pretty pout, her love for her goat, her love for singing, her modesty. She took care to dress herself in the morning in the corner of her cell, for fear of some inhabitants of the neighboring attics might see her through the window. When the thought of Phoebus left her time, the girl sometimes thought of Quasimodo. He was the sole bond, the sole connection, the sole communication which remained to her with men, with the living. Unfortunate girl. She was more outside the world than Quasimodo. She understood not in the least the strange friend whom chance had given her. She often reproached herself for not feeling a gratitude which should close her eyes, but decidedly she could not accustom herself to the poor bell-ringer. He was too ugly. She had left the whistle which he had given her lying on the ground. This did not prevent Quasimodo from making his appearance from time to time during the first few days. She did her best not to turn aside with too much repugnance when he came to bring her her basket of provisions or her jug of water, but he always perceived the slightest movement of this sort, and then he withdrew sadly. Once he came at that moment when she was caressing Jolly. He stood pensively for several minutes before this graceful group of the goat and the young girl. At last he said, shaking his heavy and ill-formed head, "My misfortune is that I still resemble a man too much. I should like to be wholly a beast, like that goat." She gazed at him in amazement. He replied to the glance, "Oh, I know why. And he went away. On another occasion, he presented himself at the door of the cell, which he never entered, at the moment when La Esmeralda was singing an old Spanish ballad, the words of which she did not understand, but which had lingered in her ear because the women had lulled her to sleep with it when she was a little child. At the sight of that villainous form which made its appearance so abruptly in the middle of her song, the young girl paused with an involuntary gesture of alarm. The unhappy bell-ringer fell upon his knees on the threshold and clasped his large, misshapen hands with a suppliant air. "Oh," he said sorrowfully, "continue, I implore you, and do not drive me away." She did not wish to pain him, and resumed her lay, trembling all over. By degrees, however, her terror disappeared, and she yielded herself wholly to the slow and melancholy air which she was singing. He remained on his knees, with hands clasped, as in prayer, attentive, hardly breathing, his gaze riveted upon the girl's brilliant eyes. On another occasion, he came to her with an awkward and timid air. "Listen," he said with an effort. "I have something to say to you." She made him a sign that she was listening. Then he began to sigh, half opened his lips, appeared for a moment to be on the point of speaking. Then he looked at her again, shook his head, and withdrew slowly, with his brow in his hand, leaving the girl stupefied. Among the grotesque personages sculptured on the wall, there was one to whom he was particularly attached, and with which he often seemed to exchange fraternal glances. Once she heard him saying to it, "Oh, why am I not of stone like you?" At last, one morning, La Esmeralda had advanced to the edge of the roof, and was looking into the place over the pointed roof of Saint-Jean-le-Rond. Quasimodo was standing behind her. He had placed himself in that position in order to spare the young girl, as far as possible, the displeasure of seeing him. All at once she started. A tear and a flash of joy gleamed simultaneously in her eyes. She knelt on the brink of the roof and extended her arms towards the place with anguish, exclaiming, "Phoebus, come! A word, a single word in the name of heaven. Phoebus!" Her voice, her face, her gesture, her whole person bore the heart-rending expression of a shipwrecked man who is making a signal of distress to the joyous vessel which is passing afar off in a ray of sunlight on the horizon. Quasimodo leaned over the place, and saw that the object of this tender and agonizing prayer was a young man, a captain, a handsome cavalier, all glittering with arms and decorations, prancing across the end of the place, and saluting with his plume a beautiful lady who was smiling at him from her balcony. However, the officer did not hear the unhappy girl calling him. He was too far away. But the poor deaf man heard. A profound sigh heaved his chest. He turned round. His heart was swollen with all the tears which he was swallowing. His convulsively clenched fists struck against his head, and when he withdrew them, there was a bunch of red hair in each hand. She paid no heed to him. He said in a low voice as he gnashed his teeth, "Damnation! That is what one should be like. 'Tis only necessary to be handsome on the outside." Meanwhile, she remained kneeling and cried with extraordinary agitation, "Oh, there he is, alighting from his horse. He is about to enter that house. Phoebus!" He does not hear me. How wicked that woman is to speak to him at the same time with me. The deaf man gazed at her. He understood this pantomime. The poor bell-ringer's eyes filled with tears, but he let none fall. All at once he pulled her gently by the border of her sleeve. She turned round. He had assumed a tranquil air. He said to her, "Would you like to have me bring him to you?" She uttered a cry of joy. "Oh, go, hasten! Run, quick! That captain! That captain! Bring him to me! I will love you for it!" She clasped her knees. He could not refrain from shaking his head sadly. "I will bring him to you," he said in a weak voice, and he turned his head and plunged down the staircase with great strides, stifling with sobs. When he reached the place, he no longer saw anything except the handsome horse hitched at the door of the gondolier house. The captain had just entered there. He raised his eyes to the roof of the church. La Esmeralda was there in the same spot, in the same attitude. He made her a sad sign with his head. Then he planted his back against one of the stone posts of the gondolier porch, determined to wait until the captain should come forth. In the house, it was one of those gala days which precede a wedding. Quasimodo beheld many people enter, but no one come out. He cast a glance towards the roof from time to time. The girl did not stir any more than himself. A groom came and unhitched the horse and led it to the stable of the house. The entire day passed thus. Quasimodo at his post, La Esmeralda on the roof, Phoebus, no doubt, at the feet of Fleur-de-Lis. At length night came, a moonless night, a dark night. Quasimodo fixed his gaze in vain upon La Esmeralda. Soon she was no more than a whiteness amid the twilight. Then nothing. All was effaced. All was black. Quasimodo beheld the front windows from top to bottom of the gondolier mansion illuminated. He saw the other casements in the place lighted one by one. He also saw them extinguished to the very last, for he remained the whole evening at his post. The officer did not come forth. When the last passers-by had returned home, when the windows of all the other houses were extinguished, Quasimodo was left entirely alone, entirely in the dark. There were at that time no lamps in the square before Notre-Dame. Meanwhile, the windows of the mansion remained lighted even after midnight. Quasimodo, motionless and attentive, beheld a throng of lively, dancing shadows pass athwart the many-colored painted panes. Had he not been deaf, he would have heard more and more distinctly, in proportion as the noise of sleeping Paris died away, a sound of feasting, laughter, and music in the mansion. Towards 1 o'clock in the morning, the guests began to take their leave. Quasimodo, shrouded in darkness, watched them all pass out through the porch illuminated with torches. None of them was the captain. He was filled with sad thoughts. At times he looked upwards into the air, like a person who is weary of waiting. Great black clouds, heavy, torn, split, hung like crepe hammocks beneath the starry dome of night. One would have pronounced them spiders' webs of the vault of heaven. In one of these moments, he suddenly beheld the long window on the balcony, whose stone balustrade projected above his head, open mysteriously. The frail glass door gave passage to 2 persons, and closed noiselessly behind them. It was a man and a woman. It was not without difficulty that Quasimodo succeeded in recognizing in the man the handsome captain, in the woman the young lady whom he had seen welcome the officer in the morning from that very balcony. The place was perfectly dark, and a double crimson curtain, which had fallen across the door the very moment it closed again, allowed no light to reach the balcony from the apartment. The young man and the young girl, so far as our deaf man could judge, without hearing a single one of their words, appeared to abandon themselves to a very tender tete-a-tete. The young girl seemed to have allowed the officer to make a girdle for her in his arms, and gently repulsed a kiss. Quasimodo looked on from below at this scene, which was all the more pleasing to witness, because it was not meant to be seen. He contemplated with bitterness that beauty, that happiness. After all, nature was not dumb in the poor fellow, and his human sensibility, all maliciously contorted as it was, quivered no less than any other. He thought of the miserable portion which Providence had allotted to him, that woman and the pleasure of love would pass forever before his eyes, and that he should never do anything but behold the felicity of others. But that which rent his heart most in his sight, that which mingled indignation with his anger, was the thought of what the condemned girl would suffer could she behold it. It is true that the night was very dark, that La Esmeralda, if she had remained at her post, and he had no doubt of this, was very far away, and that it was all that he himself could do to distinguish the lovers on the balcony. This consoled him. Meanwhile, their conversation grew more and more animated. The young lady appeared to be entreating the officer to ask nothing more of her. Of all this, Quasimodo could distinguish only the beautiful clasped hands, the smiles mingled with tears, the young girl's glances directed to the stars, the eyes of the captain lowered ardently upon her. Fortunately, for the young girl was beginning to resist but feebly, the door of the balcony suddenly opened once more, and an old dame appeared. The beauty seemed confused. The officer assumed an air of displeasure, and all three withdrew. A moment later, a horse was champing his bit under the porch, and the brilliant officer, enveloped in his night cloak, passed rapidly before Quasimodo. The bell-ringer allowed him to turn the corner of the street, and he ran after him with his ape-like agility, shouting, "Hey there, Captain!" The captain halted. "What wants this knave with me?" said he, catching sight through the gloom of that hip-shot form which he ran limping after him. Meanwhile, Quasimodo had caught up with him, and had boldly grasped his horse's bridle. "Follow me, Captain. There is one here who desires to speak with you." "Here is a villainous, ruffled bird which I fancy I have seen somewhere. Will you let my horse's bridle alone?" "Captain," replied the deaf man, "do you not ask me who it is?" "I tell you to release my horse," retorted Phoebus impatiently. "What means the knave by clinging to a bridle of my steed? Do you take my horse for a gallows?" Quasimodo, far from releasing the bridle, prepared to force him to retrace his steps. Unable to comprehend the captain's resistance, he hastened to say to him, "Come, Captain, 'tis a woman who is waiting for you," he added with an effort. "A woman who loves you." "A rare rascal," said the captain, "who thinks me obliged to go to all the women who love me, or who say they do. And what if, by chance, she should resemble you, you face of a screech owl? Tell the woman who has sent you that I am about to marry, and that she may go to the devil." "Listen," exclaimed Quasimodo, thinking to overcome his hesitation with a word. "Come, Monseigneur, 'tis the performing woman whom you know." This word did, indeed, produce a great effect on Phoebus, but not of the kind which the deaf man expected. It will be remembered that our gallant officer had retired with Fleur-de-Lis several moments before Quasimodo had rescued the condemned girl from the hands of Charmolue. Afterwards, in all his visits to the mansion, he had taken care not to mention that woman, the memory of whom was, after all, painful to him. And on her side, Fleur-de-Lis had not deemed it politic to tell him that the girl was alive. Hence, Phoebus believed poor Similar to be dead, and that a month or two had elapsed since her death. Let us add that, for the last few moments, the captain had been reflecting on the profound darkness of the night, the supernatural ugliness, the sepulchral voice of the strange messenger, that it was past midnight, that the street was deserted, as on the evening when the surly monk had accosted him, and that his horse snorted as it looked at Quasimodo. "The young performer!" he exclaimed, almost frightened. "Look here, do you come from the other world?" And he laid his hand on the hilt of his dagger. "Quick, quick!" said the deaf man, endeavoring to drag the horse along. "This way!" Phoebus dealt him a vigorous kick in the chest. Quasimodo's eye flashed. He made a motion to fling himself on the captain. Then he drew himself up stiffly and said, "Oh, how happy you are to have someone who loves you." He emphasized the word someone, and losing the horse's bridle. "Begone!" Phoebus spurred on in all haste, swearing. Quasimodo watched him disappear in the shades of the street. "Oh," said the poor deaf man in a very low voice, "to refuse that." And he re-entered Notre-Dame, lighted his lamp, and climbed the tower again. The young girl was still in the same place as he had supposed. She flew to meet him as far off as she could see him. "Alone?" she cried, clasping her beautiful hands sorrowfully. "I could not find him," he said coldly. "You should have waited all night," she said angrily. He saw her gesture of wrath and understood the reproach. "I will lie in wait for him better another time," he said, dropping his head. "Begone," she said to him. He left her. She was displeased with him. He preferred to have her abuse him rather than to have afflicted her. He had kept all the pain to himself. From that day forth, the young dancer no longer saw him. He ceased to come to her cell. At the most, she occasionally caught a glimpse at the summit of the towers of the bell-ringer's face turned sadly to her. But as soon as she perceived him, he disappeared. We must admit that she was not much grieved by this voluntary absence on the part of the poor hunchback. At the bottom of her heart she was grateful to him for it. Moreover, Quasimodo did not deceive himself on this point. She no longer saw him, but she felt the presence of a good genius about her. Her provisions were replenished by an invisible hand during her slumbers. One morning, she found a cage of birds on her window. There was a piece of sculpture above her window which frightened her. She had shown this more than once in Quasimodo's presence. One morning, for all these things happened at night, she no longer saw it. It had been broken. The person who had climbed up to that carving must have risked his life. Sometimes, in the evening, she heard a voice, concealed beneath the wind screen of the bell tower, singing a sad, strange song, as though to lull her to sleep. The lines were unrhymed, such as a deaf person can make. Good. It's all in French, but luckily there is a footnote. Okay. Look not at the face, young girl. Look at the heart. The heart of a handsome young man is often deformed. There are hearts in which love does not keep. Young girl, the pine is not beautiful. It is not beautiful like the poplar, but it keeps its foliage in winter. Alas, what is the use of saying that? That which is not beautiful has no right to exist. Beauty loves only beauty. April turns her back on January. Beauty is perfect. Beauty can do all things. Beauty is the only thing which does not exist by halves. The raven flies only by day, the owl flies only by night, the swan flies by day and by night. One morning, on awaking, she saw on her window two vases filled with flowers. One was a very beautiful and very brilliant but cracked vase of glass. It had allowed the water with which it had been filled to escape, and the flowers which it contained were withered. The other was an earthenware pot, coarse and common, but which had preserved all its water, and its flowers remained fresh and crimson. I know not whether it was done intentionally, but La Esmeralda took the faded nosegay and wore it all day long. That day she did not hear the voice singing in the tower. She troubled herself very little about it. She passed her days in caressing Jolly, in watching the door of the mansion, in talking to herself about Phoebus, and in crumbling up her bread for the swallows. She had entirely ceased to see or hear Quasimodo. The poor bell ringer seemed to have disappeared from the church. One night, nevertheless, when she was not asleep, but was thinking of her handsome captain, she heard something breathing near her cell. She rose in alarm, and saw by the light of the moon a shapeless mass lying across her door on the outside. It was Quasimodo, asleep there upon the stones. End of chapter 4. Okay, chapter 4. Esmeralda is now coming back to being herself, and she is just woe is me, still forever in love with Phoebus. And so that's all she's thinking about. And her and Quasimodo are getting a friendly relationship. Like she's able to talk to him and things like that, and able to like stand being in the same room with him and all of those things. And she is looking out onto the like courtyard area and sees Phoebus, and she's like, "Oh my God, there he is!" And she calls out to him, but he doesn't hear her. And so she turns to Quasimodo and is like, "Bro, I will love you forever if you can bring him to me." And Quasimodo is like, "Well, all right." And so he goes and he like follows Phoebus around, and Phoebus ends up at his betrothed mansion, Fleur-de-Lis's mansion. And Quasimodo is perched, just waiting for the captain to be separated from the group so that he can snatch him up and like flee off to Esmeralda. And it doesn't happen. And he continues to wait, and people are, leaving in the courtyard. They're leaving, but the mansion is still popping. And after about like 1 a.m., people start to leave, and the captain is still there. And all of the lights in all of the streets have gone out. And finally, two people exit, the captain and Fleur de Lis. And Quasimodo is still watching. And then, like, Fleur de Lis's mom comes out, and blah, blah, blah. And then finally, he's able to get Phoebus alone. And he's like, "You need to come with me. There's a girl who loves you." And Phoebus is like, "I'm not just going to be summoned by every girl who has ever said that she thinks that I love her or that she loves me. Like, that's just far too much." And so Quasimodo tries a couple different times to get him to follow, and it's not working. And he's like, that young dancer, like loves you and wants to see you." And Phoebus thinks that she died. He didn't see her get saved by Quasimodo, and so he like thinks that Quasimodo is now like this spirit from the other realm who is like bringing him to, I don't know, who knows what he's thinking. But he doesn't really think that Esmeralda's real. So he like kicks Quasimodo, says some mean things, and then like flees. And so instead of breaking Esmeralda's heart, Quasimodo says that he couldn't find him, and that he just couldn't do it. He's like, "But I'll wait, like I'll go do it again." And Esmeralda is just mad at him for doing this. And Quasimodo's like, "Well, I would rather her mad at me for, like, protecting her than saying the actual truth of something that would, like, actually deeply hurt her. And that's where we ended. Like, all right, chapter 5. The Key to the Red Door. In the meantime, public rumor had informed the Archdeacon of the miraculous manner in which the young performer had been saved. When he heard it, he knew not what his sensations were. He had reconciled himself to La Esmeralda's death. In that matter, he was tranquil. He had reached the bottom of personal suffering. The human heart, Dom Claude had meditated upon these matters, can contain only a certain quantity of despair. When the sponge is saturated, the sea may pass over it without causing a single drop more to enter it. Now, with La Esmeralda dead, the sponge was soaked. All was at an end on this earth for Dom Claude. But to feel that she was alive, and Phoebus also, meant that tortures, shocks, alternatives, life were beginning again, and Claude was weary of all of this. When he heard this news, he shut himself in his cell in the cloister. He appeared neither at the meetings of the chapter nor at the services. He closed his door against all, even against the bishop. He remained thus immured for several weeks. He was believed to be ill, and so he was, in fact. What did he do while thus shut up? With what thoughts was the unfortunate man contending? Was he giving final battle to his formidable passion? Was he concocting a final plan of death for her and of perdition for himself? Shihan, his cherished brother, his spoiled child, came once to his door, knocked, swore, entreated, gave his name 60 of times. Claude did not open. He passed whole days with his face close to the panes of his window. From that window, situated in the cloister, he could see La Esmeralda's chamber. He often saw herself with her goat, sometimes with Quasimodo. He remarked the little attentions of the ugly deaf man, his obedience, his delicate and submissive ways with this girl. He recalled, for he had a good memory, and memory is the tormentor of the jealous. He recalled the singular look of the bell-ringer, bent on the dancer upon a certain evening. He asked himself what motive could have impelled Quasimodo to save her. He was the witness of 1,000 little scenes between the dancer and the deaf man, the pantomime of which, viewed from afar and commented on by his passion, appeared very tender to him. He distrusted the capriciousness of women. Then he felt a jealousy which he could never have believed possible awakening within him, a jealousy which made him redden with shame and indignation. One might condone the captain, but this one, he thought, this thought upset him. His nights were frightful. As soon as he learned that this girl was alive, the cold ideas of spectre and tomb which had persecuted him for a whole day vanished, and the flesh returned to goad him. He turned and twisted on his couch at the thought that the dark-skinned maiden was so near him. Every night his delirious imagination represented La Esmeralda to him in all the attitudes which has caused his blood to boil most. He beheld her outstretched upon the poniard captain, her eyes closed, her beautiful bare throat covered with Phoebus's blood, at that moment of bliss when the archdeacon had imprinted on her pale lips that kiss whose burn the unhappy girl, though half dead, had felt. He beheld her, again, stripped by the savage hands of the torturers, allowing them to bear and to enclose in the boot with its iron screws her tiny foot, her delicate, rounded leg, her white and supple knee. Again he beheld that ivory knee which alone remained outside of Torturu's horrible apparatus. Lastly, he pictured the young girl in her shift, with the rope about her neck, shoulders bare, feet bare, almost nude. as he had seen her on that last day. These images of voluptuousness made him clench his fists, and a shiver run along his spine. One night, among others, they heated so cruelly his virgin and priestly blood that he bit his pillow, leaped from his bed, flung on a surplice over his shirt, and left his cell, lamp in hand, half naked, wild, his eyes aflame. He knew where to find the key to the red door, which connected the cloister with the church, and he always had about him, as the reader knows, the key of the staircase leading to the towers. End of chapter 5. Real short. We're back with Claude, and he's like, woe is me. I guess she's alive, and I'm jealous, and I can vividly imagine every interaction that I've had with her. And I'm now seeing Esmeralda hang out with Quasimodo, and gosh darn it, don't like it. That was the chapter. All right. Chapter 6. Continuation of the key to the red door. That night, La Esmeralda had fallen asleep in her cell, full of oblivion, of hope, and of sweet thoughts. She had already been asleep for some time, dreaming, as always, of Phoebus, when it seemed to her that she heard a noise near her. She slept lightly and uneasily, the sleep of a bird. A mere nothing waked her. She opened her eyes. The night was very dark. Nevertheless, she saw a figure gazing at her through the window. A lamp lighted up this apparition. The moment that the figure saw that La Esmeralda had perceived it, it blew out the lamp. But the young girl had had time to catch a glimpse of it. Her eyes closed again with terror. "Oh," she said in a faint voice, "the priest." All her past unhappiness came back to her like a flash of lightning. She fell back on her bed, chilled. A moment later she felt a touch along her body which made her shoulder so that she straightened herself up in a sitting posture, wide awake and furious. The priest had just slipped in beside her. He encircled her with both arms. She tried to scream and could not. "Begone, monster! Begone, assassin!" she said in a voice which was low and trembling with wrath and terror. "Mercy, mercy," murmured the priest, pressing his lips to her shoulder. She seized his bald head by its remnant of hair and tried to thrust aside his kisses as though they had been bites. "Mercy," repeated the unfortunate man. "If you had but knew what my love for you is. 'Tis fire, melted lead, 1,000 daggers in my heart." She stopped his two arms with superhuman force. "Let me go," she said, "or I will spit in your face." He released her. "Vilify me. Strike me by malicious. Be malicious. Do what you will, but have mercy. Love me." Then she struck him with the fury of a child. She made her beautiful hands stiff to bruise his face. "Begone, demon!" "Love me. Pity!" cried the poor priest, returning her blows with caresses. All at once she felt him stronger than herself. "There must be an end to this," he said, gnashing his teeth. She was conquered, palpitating in his arms and in his power. She felt a wanton hand straying over her. She made a last effort and began to cry. "Help! A vampire! A vampire!" Nothing came. Jolly alone was awake and bleeding with anguish. "Hush," said the panting priest. All at once, as she struggled and crawled on the floor, her hand came in contact with something cold and metallic. It was Quasimodo's whistle. She seized it with a convulsive hope, raised it to her lips, and blew with all the strength that she had left. The whistle gave a clear, piercing sound. "What is that?" said the priest. Almost at the same instant, he felt himself raised by a vigorous arm. The cell was dark. He could not distinguish clearly who it was that held him thus, but he heard teeth chattering with rage, and there was just sufficient light scattered among the gloom to allow him to see above his head the blade of a large knife. The priest fancied that he perceived the form of Quasimodo. He assumed that it could be no one but he. He remembered to have stumbled, as he entered, over a bundle which was stretched across the door on the outside. But, as the newcomer did not utter a word, he knew not what to think. He flung himself on the arm which held the knife, crying, "Quasimodo!" He forgot at that moment of distress that Quasimodo was deaf. In a twinkling, the priest was overthrown, and a leaden knee rested on his breast. From the angular imprint of that knee he recognized Quasimodo. But what was to be done? How could he make the other recognize him? The darkness rendered the deaf man blind. He was lost. The young girl, pitiless as an enraged tigress, did not intervene to save him. The knife was approaching his head. The moment was critical. All at once, his adversary seemed stricken with hesitation. "No blood on her," he said in a dull voice. It was, in fact, Quasimodo's voice. Then the priest felt a large hand dragging him, feet first, out of the cell. It was there that he was to die. Fortunately for him, the moon had risen a few moments before. When they had passed through the door of the cell, its pale rays fell upon the priest's countenance. Quasimodo looked him full in the face. A trembling seized him, and he released the priest and shrank back. The girl, who had advanced to the threshold of her cell, beheld with surprise their roles abruptly changed. It was now the priest who menaced, Quasimodo who was suppliant. The priest, who was overwhelming the deaf man with gestures of wrath and reproach, made the latter a violent sign to retire. The deaf man dropped his head. Then he came and knelt to the girl's door. "Monseigneur," he said in a grave and resigned voice, "you shall do all that you please afterwards, but kill me first." So saying, he presented his knife to the priest. The priest, beside himself, was about to seize it, but the young girl was quicker than he. She wrenched the knife from Quasimodo's hands and burst into a frantic laugh. "Approach," she said to the priest. She held the blade high. The priest remained undecided. She would certainly have struck him. Then she added with a pitiless expression, well aware that she was about to pierce the priest's heart with thousands of red-hot irons, "Oh, I know that Phoebus is not dead." The priest overturned Quasimodo on the floor with a kick, and, quivering with rage, darted back under the vault of the staircase. When he was gone, Quasimodo picked up the whistle which he had just saved her life. "It was getting rusty," he said as he handed it back to her. Then he left her alone. The young girl, deeply agitated by this violent scene, fell back exhausted on her bed and began to sob and weep. Her horizon was becoming gloomy once more. The priest had groped his way back to his cell. It was settled. Dom Claude was jealous of Quasimodo. He repeated with a thoughtful air his fatal words, "No one shall have her." End of the chapter, and end of book 9. All right, so Dom Claude is like, "Well, I'm gonna go up there. I have the key. I can just let my little self up there." And it's the middle of the night. It's super, super dark, and he is just like holding on to Esmeralda. demanding mercy and demanding that she love him. And she is terrified because of course she is. She's terrified and she's trying to push him away. She's trying to get him away from her as much as possible. And it's just not working. And she's like grasping around for something to help her. And she holds on and she finds the whistle that Quasimodo left her. And so she blows the whistle. And Quasimodo has been sleeping outside of her door. And he comes in. The priest doesn't know who it is, but the priest is being lifted up, and the priest turns around and sees like a knife and Quasimodo. And it's super, super dark, and Quasimodo can't hear, he's deaf, and he can't really see. So Claude is like, oh crap, Quasimodo doesn't know that it's me and that he shouldn't murder me because I am who I am. And Quasimodo says, no blood on the girl, and then drags Claude outside of the room. And like something's happening. Esmeralda is trying to like gather herself after this traumatic experience, and she goes over to the door to see what's going on. And now she sees that the roles have reversed. So now Quasimodo is being submissive and like I don't know, like more childlike, and the priest is the one who is mad and angry and having violent gestures and everything. And then Quasimodo runs over to Esmeralda and is like, you can do whatever you want with her, but you have to kill me first. And like holds out the blade. Esmeralda grabs the blade and is like, oh, I'm gonna do do harm. Come here, type of a thing. And she has like a maniacal laughter, which love a good maniacal laughter. And the priest leaves, and Quasimodo leaves, and she's just left to catch her breath. She is exhausted from this. And Claude, back in his room, is like, no one will have her. Which I hate. I hate that. I hate it so much. Oh, I hate it. It was an exciting chapter. An exciting chapter. And you know what didn't happen at all in that chapter? Gothic architecture. Not once did we talk about Gothic architecture. Wild. All right, so now we are entering into the next book, book 10th. Book 10th. Chapter 1. Ooh, it is it's a long boy. So get cozy. We've had longer chapters, yes, but get cozy, because here we go. Chapter 1. Gringoire has many good ideas in succession. Rue de Bernardines. Here we go. As soon as Pierre Gringoire had seen how this whole affair was turning, and that there would decidedly be the rope, hanging, and other disagreeable things for the principal personages in this comedy, he had not cared to identify himself with the matter further. The outcasts with whom he had remained, reflecting that, after all, it was the best company in Paris. The outcasts had continued to interest themselves in behalf of the dancer. He had thought it very simple on the part of people who had, like herself, nothing else to prospect but Charmolue and Torterue, and who, unlike himself, did not gallop through the regions of imagination between the wings of Pegasus. From their remarks he had learned that his wife of the broken crock had taken refuge in Notre-Dame, and he was very glad of it. But he felt no temptation to go and see her there. He meditated occasionally on the little goat, and that was all. Moreover, he was busy executing feats of strength during the day for his living, and at night he was engaged in composing a memorial against the Bishop of Paris, for he remembered having been drenched by the wheels of his mills, and he cherished a grudge against him for it. He also occupied himself with annotating the fine work of Baudry le Rouge, Bishop of Noyon, and Tournai, de Cupa Petrarum, which had given him a violent passion for architecture, an inclination which had replaced in his heart his passion for Hermeticism, of which it was, moreover, only a natural corollary, since there is an intimate relation between Hermeticism and Masonry. Gringoire had passed from the love of an idea to the love of the form of that idea. One day, he had halted near Saint-Germain-l'Auxerrois, at the corner of a mansion called For l'Evêque, the bishop's tribunal, which stood opposite another called For le Roi, the king's tribunal. At the bishop's tribunal, there was a charming chapel of the 14th century, whose apse was on the street. Gringoire was devoutly examining its exterior sculptures. He was in one of those moments of egotistical, exclusive, supreme enjoyment when the artist beholds nothing in the world but art, and the world in art. All at once he feels a hand laid gravely on his shoulder. He turns round. It was his old friend, his former master, Monsieur the Archdeacon. He was stupefied. It was a long time since he had seen the Archdeacon, and Dom Claude was one of those solemn and impassioned men, a meeting with whom always upsets the equilibrium of a skeptical philosopher. The Archdeacon maintained silence for several minutes, during which Gringoire had time to observe him. He found Dom Claude greatly changed, pale as a winter's morning, with hollow eyes and hair almost white. The priest broke the silence at length by saying in a tranquil but glacial tone, "How do you do, Master Pierre?" "My health?" replied Gringoire. One can say both one thing and another on that score. Still, it is good, on the whole. I take not too much of anything. You know, master, that the secret of keeping well, according to Hippocrates, id est sibi potus somni Venus omnia moderata sint. So you have no care, Master Pierre, resumed the Archdeacon, gazing intently at Gringoire. None, I faith. And what are you doing now? You see, master, I am examining the chiseling of these stones, and the manner in which yonder bas-relief is thrown out. The priest began to smile, with that bitter smile which raises only one corner of the mouth. And that amuses you? "'Tis paradise!" exclaimed Gringoire, and leaning over the sculptures with the fascinated air of a demonstrator of living phenomena. "Do you not think, for instance, that yon metamorphosis in bas-relief is executed with much adroitness, delicacy, and patience? Observe that slender column. Around what capital have you seen foliage more tender and better caressed by the chisel? Here are 3 raised bosses of Jean Nelivine. They are not the finest works of this great master. Nevertheless, the naivete, the sweetness of the faces, the gaiety of the attitudes and draperies, and that inexplicable charm which is mingled with the defects, render the little figures very diverting and delicate, perchance even too much so. You think that is not diverting?" "Yes, certainly," said the priest. "And if you were to see the interior of the chapel," resumed the poet, with his garrulous enthusiasm, "carvings everywhere. 'Tis as thickly clustered as the head of a cabbage. The apse is of a very devout and so peculiar a fashion that I have never beheld anything like it elsewhere." Dom Claude interrupted him. "You are happy, then?" Gringoire replied warmly. "On my honor, yes. First I loved women, then animals. Now I love stones. They are quite as amusing as women and animals, and less treacherous. The priest laid his hand on his brow. It was his habitual gesture. Really? Stay, said Gringoire. One has one's pleasures. He took the arm of the priest, who let him have his way, and made him enter the staircase turret of For l'Evêque. Here is a staircase. Every time that I see it, I am happy. It is of the simplest and rarest manner of steps in Paris. All the steps are beveled underneath. Its beauty and simplicity consists in the interspacing of both, being a foot or more wide, which are interlaced, interlocked, fitted together, enchained, enchased, interlined one upon another, and bite into each other in a manner that is truly firm and graceful. And you desire nothing? No. And you regret nothing? Neither regret nor desire. I have arranged my mode of life. What men arrange, said Claude, things disarrange. I am a Pyrrhonian philosopher, replied Gringoire, and I hold all things in equilibrium. And how do you earn your living? I still make epics and tragedies now and then, but that which brings me and most is the industry with which you are acquainted, master, carrying pyramids and chairs in my teeth. This trade is but a rough one for a philosopher. 'Tis still equilibrium, said Gringoire. When one has an idea, one encounters it in everything. I know that, replied the archdeacon. After a silence, the priest resumed. You are, nevertheless, tolerably poor. Poor, yes. Unhappy? No. At that moment, a trampling of horses was heard, and our two interlocutors beheld defiling at the end of the street a company of the king's unattached archers, their lances borne high, an officer at their head. The cavalcade was brilliant, and its march resounded on the pavement. How you gaze at that officer, said Gringoire to the archdeacon. Because I think I recognize him. What do you call him? I think, said Claude, that his name is Phoebus. Phoebus? A curious name. There is also a Phoebus Comte de Foix. I remember having known a wench who swore only by the name of Phoebus. Come away from here, said the priest. I have something to say to you. From the moment of that troop's passing, some agitation had pierced through the archdeacon's glacial envelope. He walked on. Gringoire followed him, being accustomed to obey him, like all who had once approached that man so full of ascendancy. They reached in silence the Rue des Bernardines, which was nearly deserted. Here, Dom Claude paused. What have you to say to me, master? Gringoire asked him. Do you not think that the dress of those cavaliers whom we have just seen is far handsomer than yours and mine? Gringoire tossed his head. Faith, I love better my red and yellow jerkin than those scales of iron and steel. A fine pleasure to produce when you walk, the same noise as a quay of old iron in an earthquake. So, Gringoire, you have never cherished envy for those handsome fellows in their military doublets? Envy for what, monsieur the archdeacon? Their strength, their armor, their discipline? Better philosophy and independence in rags. I prefer to be the head of a fly rather than the tail of a lion. That is singular, said the priest dreamily. Yet a handsome uniform is a beautiful thing. Gringoire, perceiving that he was in a pensive mood, quitted him to go and admire the porch of a neighboring house. He came back, clapping his hands. If you were less engrossed with the fine clothes of men of war, Monseigneur, the Archdeacon, I would entreat you to come to see this door. I have always said that the house of Aubrey had the most superb entrance in the world. Pierre Gringoire, said the Archdeacon, what have you done with that little dancer? La Esmeralda. You changed the conversation so abruptly. Was she not your wife? Yes, by virtue of a broken crock. We were to have 4 years of it. By the way, added Gringoire, looking at the Archdeacon in a half-bantering way, are you still thinking of her? And you think of her no longer? Very little. I have so many things. Good heavens, how pretty that little goat was. Had she not saved your life? 'Tis true, pardieu. Well, what has become of her? What have you done with her? I cannot tell you. I believe that they have hanged her. You believe so? I'm not sure. When I saw that they wanted to hang people, I retired from the game. That is all you know of it. Wait a bit. I was told that she had taken refuge in Notre-Dame, and that she was safe there, and I am delighted to hear it, and I have not been able to discover whether the goat was saved with her, and that is all I know. I will tell you more, cried Dom Claude, and his voice, hitherto low, slow, and almost indistinct, turned to thunder. She has, in fact, taken refuge in Notre-Dame, but in 3 days justice will reclaim her, and she will be hanged on the Greve. There is a decree of Parliament. That's annoying, said Gringoire. The priest, in an instant, became cold and calm again. And who the devil, resumed the poet, has amused himself with soliciting a decree of reintegration? Why couldn't they leave Parliament in peace? What harm does it do if a poor girl takes shelter under the flying buttresses of Notre-Dame, beside the swallows' nests? There are Satans in this world, remarked the Archdeacon. 'Tis devilish badly done, observed Gringoire. The Archdeacon resumed after a silence. So she saved your life. Among my good friends, the outcasts, a little more or a little less, and I should have been hanged. They would have been sorry for it today. Would not you like to do something for her? I ask nothing better, Dom Claude. But what if I entangled myself in some villainous affair? What matters it? What matters it? You are good, master, that you are. I have 2 great works already begun. The priest smote his brow. In spite of the calm which he affected, a violent gesture betrayed his internal convulsions from time to time. How is she to be saved? Gringoire said to him. Master, I will reply to you, il padelt, which means in Turkish, God is our hope. How is she to be saved? Repeated Claude dreamily. Gringoire smote his brow in his turn. Listen, master. I have imagination. I will devise expedients for you. What if one were to ask her pardon from the king? Of Louis XI? A pardon? Why not? To take the tiger's bone from him? Gringoire began to seek fresh expedients. Well, stay. Shall I address to the midwives a request accompanied by the declaration that this girl is with child? This made the priest's hollow eye flash. With child? Knave, do you know anything of this? Gringoire was alarmed by his air. He hastened to say, Oh, no, not I. Our marriage was a real foris maritagium. I stayed outside, but one might obtain a respite all the same. Madness, infamy, hold your tongue. You do wrong to get angry, muttered Gringoire. One obtains a respite. That does no harm to anyone, and allows the midwives, who are poor women, to earn 40 deniers parisis. The priest was not listening to him. But she must leave that place, nevertheless, he murmured. The decree is to be executed within 3 days. Moreover, there will be no decree. That Quasimodo. Women have very depraved tastes. He raised his voice. Master Pierre, I have reflected well. There is but one means of safety for her. What? I see none myself. Listen, Master Pierre. Remember that you owe your life to her. I will tell you my idea frankly. The church is watched night and day. Only those are allowed to come out who have been seen to enter. Hence, you can enter. You will come. I will lead you to her. You will change clothes with her. She will take your doublet. You will take her petticoat. So far it goes well, remarked the philosopher. And then? And then, she will go forth in your garments. You will remain in hers. You will be hanged, perhaps, but she will be saved. Gringoire scratched his ear with a very serious air. Stay, said he. That is an idea which would never have occurred to me unaided. At Dom Claude's proposition, the open and benign face of the poet had abruptly clouded over, like a smiling Italian landscape, when an unlucky squall comes up and dashes a cloud across the sun. Well, Gringoire, what say you to the means? I say, master, that I shall not be hanged, perchance, but that I shall be hanged indubitably. That concerns us not. The deuce, said Gringoire. She has saved your life. 'Tis a debt that you are discharging. There are a great many others which I do not discharge. Master Pierre, it is absolutely necessary. The archdeacon spoke imperiously. Listen, Dom Claude, replied the poet in utter consternation. You cling to that idea, and you are wrong. I do not see why I should get myself hanged in someone else's place. What have you, then, which attaches you so strongly to life? 1,000 reasons. What reasons, if you please? What? The air, the sky, the morning, the evening, the moonlight, my good friends the thieves, our jeers with the old hags of go-betweens, the fine architecture of Paris to study, 3 great books to make, one of them being against the bishops and his mills. And how can I tell all? Anaxagoras said that he was in the world to admire the sun, and then, from morning till night, I have the happiness of passing all my days with a man of genius, who is myself, which is very agreeable. A head fit for a mule bell, muttered the archdeacon. Oh, tell me who preserved for you that life which you render so charming to yourself. To whom do you owe it that you breathe that air, behold that sky, and can still amuse your lark's mind with your whimsical nonsense and madness? Where would you be had it not been for her? Do you then desire that she, through whom you are alive, should die? That she should die, that beautiful, sweet, adorable creature who is necessary to the light of the world and more divine than God, while you, half wise and half a fool, a vain sketch of something, a sort of vegetable which thinks that it walks and thinks that it thinks, you will continue to live with the life which you have stolen from her, as useless as a candle in broad daylight? Come, have a little pity, Gringoire. Be generous in your turn. It was she who set the example. The priest was vehement. Gringoire listened to him at first with an undecided air. Then he became touched, and wound up with a grimace which made his pallid face resemble that of a newborn infant with an attack of the colic. You are pathetic, said he, wiping away a tear. Well, I will think about it. That's an odd idea of yours, after all, he continued after a pause. Who knows? Perhaps they will not hang me. He who becomes betrothed does not always marry. When they find me in that little lodging so grotesquely muffled in petticoat and coif, perchance they will burst with laughter. And then, if they do hang me, well, the halter is as good a death as any. 'Tis a death worthy of a sage who has wavered all his life, a death which is neither flesh nor fish, like the mind of a veritable skeptic, a death all stamped with Pyrrhonism and hesitation, which holds the middle station betwixt heaven and earth, which leaves you in suspense. 'Tis a philosopher's death, and I was destined thereto, perchance. It is magnificent to die as one has lived. The priest interrupted him. Is it agreed? What is death, after all? Pursued Gringoire with exultation. A disagreeable moment, a toll gate, a passage of little to nothingness. Someone having said Cercitus, the megalopolitan, there we go, if he were willing to die. Why not? He replied, for after my death I shall see those great men, Pythagoras among the philosophers, Hecataeus among historians, Homer among poets, Olympus among musicians. The archdeacon gave him his hand. It is settled, then. You will come tomorrow? The gesture recalled Gringoire to reality. Ah, faith, no, said he in a tone of a man just waking up. Be hanged! 'Tis too absurd. I will not. Farewell, then. And the archdeacon added between his teeth, I'll find you again. I do not want that devil of a man to find me, thought Gringoire, and he ran after Don Claude. Stay, Monseigneur, the archdeacon, no ill feelings between old friends. You take an interest in that girl, my wife, I mean, and 'tis well. You have devised a scheme to get her out of Notre-Dame, but your way is extremely disagreeable to me. If I had only another one myself, I beg to say that a luminous inspiration has just occurred to me. If I possessed an expedient for extricating her from a dilemma, without compromising my own neck to the extent of a single running knot, what would you say to it? Will not that suffice you? Is it absolutely necessary that I should be hanged in order that you may be content? The priest tore out the buttons of his cassock with impatience. Stream of words, what is your plan? Yes, resumed Gringoire, talking to himself, and touching his nose with his forefinger in sign of meditation. That's it. The thieves are brave fellows. The tribe of Egypt love her. They will rise at the first word. Nothing easier. A sudden stroke, under the cover of the disorder. They will easily carry her off. Beginning tomorrow evening. They will ask nothing better. The plan. Speak, cried the archdeacon, shaking him. Gringoire turned majestically towards him. Leave me. You see that I am composing. He meditated for a few moments more, then began to clap his hands over his thought, crying, Admirable! Success is sure! The plan! Repeated Claude in wrath. Gringoire was radiant. Come, that I may tell you that very softly. 'Tis a truly gallant counterplot, which will extricate us all from the matter. Pardieu, it must be admitted that I am no fool. He broke off. Oh, by the way, is the little goat with the wench? Yes, the devil take you. They would have hanged it also, would they not? What is that to me? Yes, they would have hanged it. They hanged a sow last month. The headsman loveth that. He eats the beast afterwards. Take my pretty Jolly. Poor little lamb. Malediction! Exclaimed Dom Claude. You are the executioner. What means of safety have you found, knave? Must your idea be extracted with the forceps? Very fine, master. This is it. Gringoire bent his head to the archdeacon's head, and spoke to him in a very low voice, casting an uneasy glance the while from one end to the other of the street, though no one was passing. When he had finished, Dom Claude took his hand and said coldly, 'Tis well. Farewell until tomorrow. Until tomorrow, repeated Gringoire. And, while the Archdeacon was disappearing in one direction, he set off in the other, saying to himself in a low voice, here's a grand affair, Monseigneur Pierre Gringoire. Never mind. 'Tis not written that, because one is of small account, one should take fright at a great enterprise. Bitot carried a great bull on his shoulders, the water wagtails, the warblers, the buntings traverse the ocean. End of chapter 1. All right, so everybody is obsessed with the hanging of the goat. Stop it. Stop it. That was the end of chapter 1. And this time we have Claude, who, after already thinking that nobody can have Esmeralda if I can't have Esmeralda, is now trying to think up a way to get her out. And he stumbles upon who else but Gringoire, and tries to convince Gringoire to get into Notre-Dame, change clothes with Esmeralda, have Esmeralda leave, and he stays in her place and then dies for her. And Gringoire is like, no, I don't think I'm gonna do that. And the the Archdeacon is like, okay, but like, what do you have to live for? Like, why? You owe her your life. Like, why won't you just die for her? And he's like, well, like, I like things. I like the morning. I like the evening. I like architecture. I like all of these other things. I like have some friends, all of blah, blah, blah. And he's like, all right, well, then what are you gonna do? And Gringoire is like trying to think of a plan, and he's like, ooh, you know what? The thieves that I hang out with, they are pretty sneaky. I think I have a plan. And the longer that Gringoire is taking, the more anxious and upset that Claude is getting. And so finally Gringoire reveals his plan to Claude, but we're not privy to it. I guess we have to keep reading to find out. Ba-ba-ba-ba-bum. Chapter 2. Turn vagabond. On re-entering the cloister, the Archdeacon found at the door of his cell his brother, Jehan du Moulin, who was waiting for him, and who had beguiled the tedium of waiting by drawing on the wall with a bit of charcoal a profile of his elder brother, enriched with a monstrous nose. Dom Claude hardly looked at his brother. His thoughts were elsewhere. That merry scamp's face, whose beaming had so often restored serenity to the priest's sombre physiognomy, was now powerless to melt the gloom which grew more dense every day over that corrupted, mephitic, and stagnant soul. "Brother," said Gian timidly, "I am come to see you." The Archdeacon did not even raise his eyes. "What then?" "Brother," resumed the hypocrite, "you are so good to me, and you give me such wise counsels, that I always return to you." "What next?" "Alas, brother, you were perfectly right when you said to me, 'Gian, cessant doctorum doctrina, discipliorum disciplina.' Gian, be wise. Gian, be learned. Pass not the night outside the college without lawful occasion and due leave of the master. Cudgel not the Bacards. Noli Giannis verbera Bicardos. Rot not like an unlettered ass, quasi asinus illiteratus, on the straw seats of the school. Gian, allow yourself to be punished at the discretion of the master. Gian, go every evening to chapel, and sing there an anthem with verse and orison to Madame the Glorious Virgin Mary." Alas, what excellent advice was that! "And then?" "Brother, you behold a culprit. A criminal, a wretch, a libertine, a man of enormities. My dear brother, Gian hath made of your counsels straw and dung to trample underfoot. I have been well chastised for it, and God is extraordinarily just. As long as I had money, I feasted. I led a mad and joyous life. Oh, how ugly and crabbed behind is debauch, which is so charming in front. Now I have no longer a blank. I have sold my napery, my shirt, and my towels. No more merry life. The beautiful candle is extinguished, and I have henceforth only a wretched tallow dip which smokes in my nose. The wenches jeer at me. I drink water. I am overwhelmed with remorse and with creditors. The rest, said the Archdeacon. Alas, my very dear brother, I should like to settle down a better life. I come to you full of contrition. I am penitent. I make my confession. I beat my breast violently. You are quite right in wishing that I should some day become a licentiate and sub-monitor in the College of Torchy. At the present moment, I feel a magnificent vocation for that profession. But I have no more ink, and I must buy some. I have no more paper, I have no more books, and I must buy some. For this purpose, I am greatly in need of a little money. And I come to you, brother, with my heart full of contrition. Is that all? Yes, said the scholar, a little money. I have none. Then the scholar said, with an air which was both grave and resolute, Well, brother, I am sorry to be obliged to tell you that very fine offers and propositions are being made to me in another quarter. You will not give me any money? No. In that case, I shall become a professional vagabond. As he uttered these monstrous words, he assumed the mien of Ajax, expecting to see the lightnings descend upon his head. The Archdeacon said coldly to him, Become a vagabond. John made him a deep bow and descended the cloister stairs, whistling. At the moment when he was passing through the courtyard of the cloister, beneath his brother's window, he heard that window open, raised his eyes, and beheld the Archdeacon's severe head emerge. Go to the devil, said Dom Claude. Here is the last money which you will get from me. At the same time, the priest flung John a purse, which gave the scholar a big bump on the forehead, and with which his brother retreated, both vexed and content, like a dog who had been stoned with marrow bones. End of chapter 2. Okay, chapter 2. It's a little bitty baby chapter, and we just have Claude's brother just patiently waiting for Claude to come back and just drawing very flattering portraits of him, of Claude. And he just, is spinning the tale in a very eloquent, like, you were right, like, all along, I should have been a lettered man, and your influence has made it that it is now my ambition to pursue such, but I don't have money to buy pens or paper and all of these things, blah, blah, blah. He needs money. And Claude is like, no. Mm-mm. And so younger brother Gian is like, all right, well, I'm gonna be a vagabond. And Claude is like, go be a vagabond. And so he leaves. And then I guess Claude just can't take it. He can't have his brother being a vagabond. And so he throws money at him and he's like, this is the last time. And that's where the chapter ended. Very short. Very short. All right, we will do just one more chapter. One more. Chapter 3. Long live mirth. The reader has probably not forgotten that part of the Court of Miracles was enclosed by the ancient wall which surrounded the city, a goodly number of whose towers had begun, even at that epoch, to fall to ruin. One of these towers had been converted into a pleasure resort by the vagabonds. There was a dram shop in the underground story, and the rest of the upper stories This was the most lively, and consequently the most hideous point of the whole outcast den. It was a sort of monstrous hive which buzzed there night and day. At night, when the remainder of the beggar horde slept, when there was no longer a window lighted in the dingy facades of the place, when not a cry was any longer to be heard proceeding from those innumerable families, those ant-hill of thieves, of wenches, and stolen or bastard children, the merry tower was still recognizable, by the noise which it made, by the scarlet light which, flashing simultaneously from the air-holes, the windows, the fissures in the cracked walls, escaped, so to speak, from its every pore. The cellar then was the dram shop. The descent to it was through a low door and by a staircase as steep as a classic Alexandrine. Over the door, by way of a sign, there hung a marvelous daub, representing new Sioux and dead chickens, with this pun below: the ringers for the dead. One evening, when the curfew was sounding from all the belfries in Paris, the sergeants of the watch might have observed, had it been granted to them to enter the formidable court of miracles, that more tumult than usual was in progress in the Vagabond's tavern, that more drinking was being done, and louder swearing. Outside in the place there were many groups conversing in low tones, as when some great plan is being framed, and here and there a knave crouching down engaged a sharpening a villainous iron blade on a paving stone. Meanwhile, in the tavern itself, wine and gaming offered such a powerful diversion to the ideas which occupied the vagabond's lair that evening, that it would have been difficult to divine from the remarks of the drinkers what was the matter in hand. They merely wore a gayer air than was their wont, and some weapon could be seen glittering between the legs of each of them: a sickle, an axe, a big two-edged sword, or the hook of an old hackbutt. The room, circular in form, was very spacious, but the tables were so thickly set, and the drinkers so numerous, that all that the tavern contained, men, women, benches, beer jugs, all that were drinking, all that were sleeping, all that were playing, the well, the lame, seemed piled up pell-mell, with as much order and harmony as a heap of oyster shells. There were a few tallow dips lighted on the tables, but the real luminary of this tavern, that which played the part in this dram shop, was the chandelier of an opera house, was the fire. This cellar was so damp that the fire was never allowed to go out, even in midsummer. An immense chimney with a sculptured mantel, all bristling with heavy iron andirons and cooking utensils, with one of those huge fires of mixed wood and peat which at night, in village streets, make the reflection of forge windows stand out so red on the opposite walls. A big dog, gravely seated in the ashes, was turning a spit loaded with meat before the coals. Great as was the confusion, after the first glance one could distinguish in that multitude three principal groups which thronged around three personages already known to the reader. One of these personages, fantastically accoutred in many an oriental rug, was Matthias Hungadi Spicali, Duke of Egypt and Bohemia. The knave was seated on a table with his legs crossed, and in a loud voice was bestowing his knowledge of magic, both black and white, on many a gaping face which surrounded him. Another rabble pressed close around our old friend, the valiant King of Tunis, armed to the teeth. Clopin was with a very serious air, and in a low voice was regulating the distribution of an enormous cask of arms, which stood wide open in front of him, and from whence poured out in profusion axes, swords, bascinets, coats of mail, broadswords, lance heads, arrows, and vartons, like apples and grapes from a horn of plenty. Everyone took something from the cask. One, a morion, another a long, straight sword, another a dagger with a cross-shaped hilt. The very children were arming themselves, and there were even cripples in bowls who, in armors and cuirass, made their way between the legs of the drinkers, like great beetles. Finally, a third audience, the most noisy, the most jovial, and the most numerous, encumbered benches and tables, in the midst of which harangued and swore a flute-like voice, which escaped from beneath a heavy armor, complete from casque to spurs. The individual who had thus screwed a whole outfit upon his body was so hidden by his warlike accoutrements that nothing was to be seen of his person save an impertinent red snub nose, a rosy mouth, and bold eyes. His belt was full of daggers and poniards, a huge sword on his hip, a rusted crossbow at his left, and a vast jug of wine in front of him, without reckoning on his right a fat wench with her bosom uncovered. All mouths around him were laughing, cursing, and drinking. Add 20 secondary groups, the waiters, male and female, running with jugs on their heads, gamblers squatting over taws, mirals, dice, vachettes, and ardent games of tringlet, quarrels in the corner, kisses in another, and the reader will have some idea of this whole picture, over which flickered the light of a great flaming fire, which made 1,000 huge and grotesque shadows dance over the walls of the drinking shop. As for the noise, it was like the inside of a bell at full peal. The dripping pan where cracked a rain of grease, filled with its continual sputtering, the intervals of these 1,000 dialogues which intermingled from one end of the apartment to the other. In the midst of this uproar, at the extremity of the tavern, on the bench inside the chimney sat a philosopher, meditating with his feet in the ashes and his eyes on the brands. It was Pierre Gringoire. "Be quick! Make haste! Arm yourselves! We set out on the march in an hour," said Clopin to his thieves. A wench was humming "Good night, father and mother. The last cover up the fire." 2 card-players were disputing. "Knave!" cried the reddest face of the 2, shaking his fist at the other. "I'll mark you with the club. You can take the place of Mistigri in the pack of cards of Monseigneur the King." "Ugh!" roared Norman, recognizable by his nasal accent. "We are packed in here like the saints of Calaville." "My sons," the Duke of Egypt was saying to his audience, in a falsetto voice, "sorceresses in France go to the witches' sabbath without broomsticks, or grease, or steed, merely by means of some magic words. The witches of Italy always have a buck waiting for them at their door. All are bound to go out through the chimney." The voice of the young scamp, armed from head to foot, dominated the uproar. "Hooray!" he was shouting. "My first day in armor. Outcast. I am an outcast. Give me something to drink, my friends. My name is Gian Frollo du Moulin, and I am a gentleman. My opinion is that if God were a guardsman, he would turn robber. Brothers, we are about to set out on a fine expedition. Lay siege to the church, burst in the doors, drag out the beautiful girl, save her from the judges, save her from the priests, dismantle the cloister, burn the bishop in his palace. All this we will do in less time than it takes for a burgomaster to eat a spoonful of soup. Our cause is just. We will plunder Notre-Dame, and that will be the end of it. We will hang Quasimodo. Do you know Quasimodo, ladies? Have you seen him make himself breathless on the big bell of the grand Pentecost festival, Con du Père? 'Tis very fine. One would say he was a devil mounted on a man. Listen to me. my friends. I am a vagabond to the bottom of my heart. I am a member of the slang thief gang in my soul. I was born an independent thief. I have been rich and I have devoured all my property. My mother wanted to make me an officer. My father, a subdeacon. My aunt, a counselor of inquests. My grandmother, prothonotary to the king. My great aunt, a treasurer of the short robe. And I have made myself an outcast. I said this to my father, who spit his curse in my face, to my mother, who set to weeping and chattering. Poor old lady, like yonder torch on the andirons. Long live mirth! I am a real vagabond. Waitress, my dear, more wine. I have still the wherewithal to pay. I want no more Suren wine. It distresses my throat. I'd, as lief, gargle my throat with a basket. Meanwhile, the rabble applauded with shouts of laughter, and seeing that the tumult was increasing around him, the scholar cried, "Oh, what a fine noise! Populu debachicantis, populoso debachicantio." Then he began to sing, his eyes swimming in ecstasy in the tone of a canon intoning vespers. Quick! Oh, there is no translation. Que cantica, que organa, que cantaline, que melodose, hic sine fine, decantentur, sonant melliflua, hymnorum, organa, suavissima, angelorum melodia, cantica cantorium mira. He broke off. Tavern keeper of the devil, give me some supper. There was a moment of partial silence, during which the sharp voice of the Duke of Egypt rose, as he gave instructions to his bohemians. The weasel is called Adroon, the fox Bluefoot, or the racer of the woods, the wolf Greyfoot or Goldfoot, the bear the old man or grandfather. The cap of a gnome confers invisibility and causes one to behold invisible things. Every toad that is baptized must be clad in red or black velvet, a bell on his neck, a bell on its feet. The godfather holds its head, the godmother its hinder parts. 'Tis the demon Sidragasum who hath the power to make wenches dance stark naked. The mass, interrupted Jihan. I should like to be this demon Sidragasum. Meanwhile, the vagabonds continued to arm themselves and whisper at the other end of the dram shop. That poor Esmeralda, said a Bohemian. She is our sister. She must be taken away from there. Is she still at Notre-Dame? went on a merchant. Yes, pardieu. Well, comrades, exclaimed the merchant, to Notre-Dame. So much the better, since there are in the chapel of Saint-Ferreau and Frochon 2 statues, the one of John the Baptist, the other of Saint Antoine, of solid gold, weighing together 7 marks of gold and 15 estilins, and the pedestals are of silver gilt, of 17 marks 5 ounces. I know that. I am a goldsmith. Here they served Jihan with his supper, and he threw himself back on the bosom of the wench beside him. He exclaimed, "Whom people call... Oh, I am perfectly happy. I have before me a fool who gazes at me with the smooth face of an archduke. Here is one of my left, whose teeth are so long that they hit his chin, and then I am like the Marshal de Guy at the siege of Pontus. I have my right resting on a hillock, ventre mahon. Comrade, you have the air of a merchant of tennis balls. You come and sit yourself beside me. I am a nobleman, my friend. Trade is incomparable with nobility. Get out of that. You others, don't fight. What Baptiste Croquoisson? You who have such a fine nose are going to risk it against the big fists of that lout. Fool! Non sequam datum est habere nosum. Not every one is favored. You are really divine, Jacqueline Ronge Auril. 'Tis a pity that you have no hair. My name is Gian Frollo, and my brother is an archdeacon. May the devil fly off with him. All that I tell you is the truth. In turning vagabond, I have gladly renounced the half of a house situated in paradise, which my brother had promised me. Dimidiam domum in paradiso. I quote the text. I have a fief in the Rue Tereshop, and all the women are in love with me, as true as Saint Eloi, as was an excellent goldsmith, and that the five trades of the good city of Paris are the tanners, the tanners, the makers of crossbelts, the purse makers, and the sweaters, that Saint Laurent was burnt with eggshells. I swear to you, comrades. Translation: that I will drink no spiced and honeyed wine for a year if I am lying now. 'Tis moonlight, my charmer. You see yonder through the window how the wind is tearing the clouds to tatters. Even thus will I do to your gorget. Wenches, wipe the children's noses and snuff the candles. Christ and Mahom, what am I eating here, Jupiter? Innkeeper, the hair which is not on the heads of your hussies one finds in your omelets. Old woman, I like bald omelets. May the devil confound you. A fine hostelry of the devil, where the hussies comb their heads with forks. We have a translation. And by the blood of God, I have neither faith, nor law, nor fire, nor dwelling place, nor king, nor God. In the meantime, Clopin had finished the distribution of arms. He approached Gringoire, who appeared to be plunged in a profound reverie with his feet on an andiron. Friend Pierre, said the king of Tunis, what devil are you thinking about? Gringoire turned to him with a melancholy smile. I love the fire, my dear lord, not for the trivial reason that fire warms the feet or cooks our soup, but because it has sparks. Sometimes I pass whole hours in watching the sparks. I discover 1,000 things in those stars which are sprinkled over the black background of the hearth. Those stars are also worlds. Thunder, if I understand you, said the outcast. Do you know what o'clock it is? I do not know, replied Gringoire. Clopin approached the Duke of Egypt. Comrade Matthias, the time we have chosen is not a good one. King Louis the 11th is said to be in Paris. Another reason for snatching our sister from his claws, replied an old Bohemian. You speak like a man, Matthias, said the king of Tunis. Moreover, we will act promptly. No resistance is to be feared in the church. The canons are hares, and we are in force. The people of the parliament will be well balked tomorrow when they come to seek her. Guts of the Pope, I don't want them to hang the pretty girl. Clopin quitted the dram shop. Meanwhile, John was shouting in a hoarse voice, I eat, I drink, I am junk, I am Jupiter. Pierre, the slaughterer, if you look at me like that again, I'll flip the dust off your nose for you. Gringoire, torn from his meditations, began to watch the wild and noisy scene which surrounded him, muttering between his teeth, Luxuriosa res vinum et tumultuosa ebriatas. Alas, what good reason I have not to drink, and how excellently spoke Saint Benoit, vinum apostrare facit etiam sapiens. At that moment, Clopin returned and shouted in a voice of thunder, Midnight! At this word, which produced the effect of the call to boot and saddle on a regiment at a halt, all the outcasts, men, women, children, rushed in a mass from the tavern, with great noise of arms and old iron implements. The moon was obscured. The court of miracles was entirely dark. There was not a single light. One could make out there a throng of men and women conversing in low tones. They could be heard buzzing, and a gleam of all sorts of weapons was visible in the darkness. Clopin mounted a large stone. Fall in your ranks. Fall in line, Egypt. Form ranks, Galilee. A movement began in the darkness. The immense multitude appeared to form a column. After a few minutes, the king of Thunis raised his voice once more. Now, silence to march through Paris. The password is little sword in pocket. The torches will not be lighted till we reach Notre-Dame. Forward march. 10 minutes later, the cavaliers of the watch fled in terror before a long procession of black and silent men which was descending towards the Pont aux Chaines through the tortuous streets which pierce the close-built neighborhoods of the markets in every direction. End of chapter 3. All right, chapter 3, we are back at the Court of Miracles, which is where Esmeralda used to live and where Gringoire is now living and hanging out and being buds with everybody. And they are all preparing to storm Notre Dame. And they are all preparing to rescue Esmeralda because they do not believe that she should be hanged. And this is them getting ready. But who is there? None other than Claude's brother. Wild. And he's just like getting drunker and drunker. You silly, silly man. Yes. So, that is where we are going to end for the night. So exciting. So exciting. We'll pick up right where we left off with a very long chapter next. We'll pick up right where we left off next time. Thank you all so much for being here. It has been a hoot and a half. It's a pleasure as always. Whether you lurk, whether you chat, I 1000% appreciate you. And I 1000% appreciate your support. If I don't see you next time, I hope to see you very soon. Goodbye.